The rain pelted down on Jersey City like God himself was trying to wash away our sins. I sprinted through the slick streets, my police uniform clinging to me like a second skin. "Stop! Police!" I shouted, my voice barely audible over the downpour. The perp was quick, I'll give him that, but I was quicker. Just as I thought I had him cornered, the bastard ducked into Angelo's auto repair. I skidded to a halt, nearly face-planting on the wet concrete. "Damn it," I muttered, catching my breath. The neon open sign flickered mockingly at me. I pushed open the door, the bell jingling cheerfully, a stark contrast to my mood. The smell of motor oil and rubber assaulted my nostrils. "Police! Anyone see a man run through here?" I called out, scanning the dingy waiting area. That's when I saw her. Blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, green eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. She was perched on a rickety chair, a magazine forgotten in her lap. "Sorry, officer," she said, her voice smooth as honey. "I just got here myself. Car trouble." I nodded, trying to ignore the way my heart skipped a beat. "Right, thanks anyway." I turned to leave, but something made me pause. "I'm Maya, by the way. Maya Thompson." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Sophia Reed." "Nice to meet you, Officer Thompson." I couldn't help but return the smile. "Just Maya is fine. Mind if I wait here a bit? My perp might circle back." Sophia gestured to the chair next to her. "Be my guest. I could use the company." I sat down, acutely aware of how close we were. The rain continued its assault outside, turning the world beyond the grimy windows into a watery blur. "So, Maya," Sophia said, turning those green eyes on me again. "What's a nice girl like you doing chasing bad guys on a night like this?" I chuckled, running a hand through my damp hair. "Just doing my job. Someone's gotta keep the streets safe, right?" "My hero," she said with a wink that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. We fell into easy conversation, the hunt for my suspect momentarily forgotten. Sophia was witty, charming, and frustratingly easy to talk to. I found myself laughing more in those few minutes than I had in months. "Ladies," a gruff voice interrupted. We both looked up to see a mechanic wiping his hands on a rag. "Miss Reed, your car's ready. Officer, there's fresh coffee in the back if you want some." Sophia stood, gathering her things. "Well, Maya, it's been a pleasure. Maybe I'll see you around sometime?" I nodded, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment I felt. "Yeah, maybe. Stay safe out there." As she walked away, I couldn't help but watch her go. There was something about Sophia Reed that intrigued me, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Little did I know, our paths were destined to cross again, and when they did, my world would be turned upside down. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. I had a job to do, a suspect to catch. But as I stepped back out into the rain, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that my life had somehow changed in that brief encounter. The city streets welcomed me back, the familiar rhythm of the night settling over me. But beneath it all, a new current thrummed, electric and alive. Something was coming. I could feel it in my bones. And for the first time in a long while, I found myself looking forward to whatever lay ahead. The precinct hummed with its usual morning chaos. I nursed my third coffee, trying to shake off the lingering thoughts of green eyes and blonde hair. It had been a week since that rainy night at Angelo's, and I still couldn't get Sophia out of my head. "Thompson?" Captain Martinez's voice cut through my reverie. "My office now." I sighed, bracing myself for another lecture about my failed pursuit. But as I entered her office, the captain's face was grim. "New case," she said, sliding a file across her desk. "White-collar stuff. Not usually our beat, but the feds want local cooperation." I flipped open the file and felt my heart stop. Staring back at me was Sophia Reed's face, her green eyes challenging me even from the grainy surveillance photo. "Sophia Reed," Martinez continued, oblivious to my shock. "Former financial advisor, wanted for embezzlement and fraud, last seen in our jurisdiction." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "What's our role?" "Eyes and ears open. Report any sightings. The feds think she might still be in the area." I nodded, my mind racing. Sophia, a criminal? It didn't add up. But then again, how well did I really know her? Back at my desk, I pored over the file. The more I read, the less sense it made. The evidence seemed circumstantial at best, and there were inconsistencies that nagged at me. "You okay, Thompson?" My partner James peered at me over his computer. You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile. Just tired. Late night. As the day wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why would a wanted fugitive strike up a conversation with a cop? It was either incredibly brazen, or incredibly stupid, or maybe. My thoughts were interrupted by a memo. All available officers were to provide backup for a sting operation at a local bar. Grateful for the distraction, I grabbed my jacket. The bar was dimly lit, pulsing with music and bodies. I scanned the crowd, more out of habit than anything else, and then I saw her. Sophia was at the bar, laughing with the bartender. She looked different, hair shorter, darker, but those eyes were unmistakable. Our gazes locked, and I saw recognition flash across her face. Before I could react, my radio crackled. All units move in. Suspects spotted at the south entrance. The bar erupted into chaos as officers swarmed in. In the confusion, I lost sight of Sophia. By the time things calmed down, she was gone. Back at the precinct, my mind was in turmoil. I should report the sighting, but something held me back. The nagging doubts about her case, the inconsistencies in the evidence. I needed answers. Late that night, I found myself outside Sophia's last known address. It was a long shot, but I had to try. To my surprise, a light was on in the apartment. I knocked, heart pounding. The door opened, and there she was. "Officer Thompson," Sophia said, her voice carefully neutral. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "It's just Maya right now," I replied, stepping inside. "We need to talk." Sophia nodded, closing the door behind me. "I suppose we do." The apartment was sparse, looking more like a temporary crash pad than a home. Sophia gestured for me to sit, then poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "I'm not what they say I am," she said, handing me a glass. "But I'm guessing you've figured that out already." I took a sip, the alcohol burning a path down my throat. "Why don't you tell me what you are, then?" And so she did. A tale of corporate intrigue, of being set up to take the fall for her boss's crimes. It was almost too fantastic to believe, but something in her eyes, in the way she spoke, rang true. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked when she finished. "I'm a cop. I should be arresting you right now." Sophia leaned in, close enough that I could smell her perfume. "Because I think you're different, Maya. I think you care about justice, not just the law." My heart raced, and not just from the proximity. "That's a hell of a gamble." She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Sometimes you have to risk it all to win." Before I could respond, her lips were on mine. The kiss was electric, awakening feelings I'd long suppressed. For a moment, I let myself get lost in it. But reality came crashing back all too soon. I pulled away, breathless and conflicted. I need to go," I stammered, stumbling to my feet. Sophia didn't try to stop me. "You know where to find me," she said softly as I reached the door. I paused, hand on the doorknob. "What happens now?" "That's up to you, Officer Thompson." As I stepped out into the night, my world had shifted once again. I was standing on a precipice, and the choice I made next would change everything. The right thing to do was clear, but was it the right thing for me? The city streets welcomed me back as always, but now they felt different, full of shadows and secrets, just like the woman I'd left behind. As I walked home, I knew sleep would be a long time coming. I had a decision to make, and the weight of it pressed down on me with every step. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and distracted days. I couldn't get Sophia out of my head, her story, her kiss, the way she made me question everything I thought I knew about myself and my job. I dove into her case file with renewed vigor, looking for anything that might corroborate her story. The more I dug, the more inconsistencies I found. Transactions that didn't add up, witnesses whose stories seemed too neat, too rehearsed. "You're obsessed with this case, Thompson," James commented one afternoon, eyeing the mess of papers on my desk. "What's the deal?" I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Something doesn't feel right. I think we might be missing something." James raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you care about white-collar crime? Leave it to the feds." But I couldn't leave it alone. Every lead I followed seemed to point away from Sophia and towards her former employers. It was circumstantial at best, but it was enough to fuel my doubts. As the sun set on another long day, I found myself outside Sophia's apartment again. This time, I didn't hesitate to knock. She opened the door, a knowing smile on her face. "I was wondering when you'd be back." Inside, the apartment looked different. Boxes were stacked against the walls, the shelves bare. Going somewhere? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Sophia shrugged. I can't stay in one place too long, you know that. We sat on the couch, the air between us charged with unspoken tensions. I've been looking into your case, I said finally. And? Her green eyes searched mine, hope and fear warring in their depths. And I think you might be telling the truth. But I need more. I need proof. Sophia leaned back, relief washing over her face. I can give you that. But Maya, you have to understand what you're getting into. These people, they're powerful. They won't hesitate to destroy you if they find out you're helping me. I took a deep breath. I know. But I can't just stand by and watch an innocent person take the fall. It goes against everything I believe in. She reached out, her hand covering mine. The touch sent sparks through my body. Thank you, she whispered. Before I could think better of it, I leaned in and kissed her. This time there was no hesitation, no pulling away. It was like a dam breaking. All the feelings I'd been holding back rushing to the surface. When we finally parted, both breathless, I saw my own desire mirrored in Sophia's eyes. But there was something else there too, a sadness, a resignation. Maya, she said softly, we can't. You know we can't. I nodded, reality crashing back. I know, but God, I want to. We spent the next few hours going over everything Sophia knew, every piece of evidence she had managed to gather before she fled. It painted a damning picture of corporate greed and corruption. As the night wore on, exhaustion began to set in. Sophia offered me her bed, insisting she'd take the couch. Too tired to argue, I accepted. Lying in her bed, surrounded by her scent, sleep eluded me. My mind raced with the implications of what I was doing. If I pursued this, if I helped Sophia, I'd be risking everything, my career, my reputation, maybe even my freedom. But the alternative, turning her in, letting her take the fall for crimes she didn't commit, was unthinkable. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Sophia poked her head in. Can't sleep either? I shook my head, making room for her on the bed. She hesitated for a moment before joining me, her body a warm presence at my side. What are we doing, Sophia? I whispered into the darkness. She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she finally replied. But I'm glad we're doing it together. We fell asleep like that, not touching but close enough to feel each other's warmth. It was the best night's sleep I'd had in weeks. The next morning, reality came crashing back with the harsh light of day. I had to get to work, had to pretend everything was normal while secretly investigating my own department's case. As I was leaving, Sophia caught my arm. Be careful, Maya, please. I nodded, trying to ignore the way my heart raced at her touch. I will, you too. Back at the precinct, I threw myself into my work, trying to act normal, but I could feel James watching me, his detective's instincts picking up on something off. Everything okay, Thompson? He asked casually over lunch. I forced a smile. Yeah, just tired. Been working late on that Reed case. He nodded, but I could see he wasn't entirely convinced. I'd have to be more careful. As the day wore on, I managed to access some files I technically shouldn't have. What I found made my blood run cold. There were inconsistencies in the official reports, witness statements that had been altered, evidence that seemed to have disappeared. I was so engrossed in what I was reading that I didn't notice Captain Martinez approaching until it was too late. Thompson, she barked, making me jump. My office, now. As I followed her, my heart pounding, I couldn't help but wonder, had I just blown everything? And if I had, what would it mean for Sophia? The door closed behind us with a finality that sent a chill down my spine. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain, nothing would ever be the same again. Captain Martinez's office felt smaller than usual, the air thick with tension. She sat behind her desk, fixing me with a stare that could strip paint. Thompson, what the hell are you doing? I swallowed hard, mind racing. I'm not sure what you mean, Captain. She leaned forward, her voice low. Cut the crap. You've been digging into the Reed case, accessing files above your clearance. What's going on? For a moment, I considered lying. But something in her eyes made me pause. Taking a deep breath, I decided to gamble on the truth. Captain, I think we've got it wrong. The evidence doesn't add up. I think Reed might be innocent. Martinez's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. She was silent for a long moment, then stood up and closed the blinds. "Sit down, Thompson," she said, her voice softer now, "and tell me everything." So I did. I laid out all the inconsistencies I'd found, the gaps in the evidence, the witness statements that didn't quite fit. I left out my personal involvement with Sophia, but I could see Martinez picking up on the gaps in my story. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, looking suddenly tired. "Damn it," she muttered. "I was afraid of this." "Captain?" She fixed me with a piercing gaze. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room, understand?" I nodded, heart racing. We've suspected for a while that something wasn't right with this case. The feds pushed it on us too hard, too fast, but we couldn't prove anything. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by suspicion. "Why are you telling me this?" Martinez smiled grimly. "Because you're the first one who's had the guts to dig deeper, and because we need your help." She outlined a plan. They needed someone on the inside, someone who could get close to Reed and gather hard evidence. Someone the corrupt officials wouldn't suspect. "You want me to go undercover," I said, realization dawning. Martinez nodded. "It's dangerous. If they catch on, we might not be able to protect you, but it might be our only shot at bringing down the real criminals." I thought of Sophia, of the kiss we'd shared, of the trust she'd placed in me. "I'll do it," I said without hesitation. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. I was officially put on administrative leave for my unauthorized access of files. It was a cover, but it still stung to hand over my badge and gun. Late one night, I made my way to Sophia's apartment. She opened the door, surprise and concern etched on her face. "Maya? What's wrong?" I stepped inside, my heart pounding. "We need to talk." Over the next hour, I laid out everything. The department's suspicions, the undercover plan, the risks involved. Sophia listened in silence, her face unreadable. When I finished, she stood up and paced the room. "This is insane, Maya. You're risking everything. For what?" "For me." I caught her hand, pulling her close. "For justice, for what's right, and yes, for you." She searched my eyes, and whatever she saw there made her decision. She nodded once, then leaned in and kissed me. This time, there was no holding back. We came together in a frenzy of passion and pent-up desire. Clothes were shed, hands explored, and for a few blissful hours, we forgot about the dangers that awaited us. Afterward, lying tangled in her sheets, Sophia traced lazy patterns on my skin. "What happens now?" she asked softly. I pulled her closer, breathing in her scent. "Now we fight back, together." The next few weeks were a delicate balancing act. By day, I played the role of a disgraced cop, bitter and resentful. By night, Sophia and I pored over documents, piecing together the puzzle of corporate corruption. We made progress, but it was slow going. The people we were up against were smart, careful. They'd covered their tracks well. One night, as we sat surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups, Sophia suddenly sat up straight. "Wait a minute," she said, grabbing a file. "Look at this." She pointed to a series of transactions, dates that didn't quite line up. It was subtle, easy to miss, but once we saw it, everything fell into place. "This is it," I breathed. "This proves they were laundering money through offshore accounts." Sophia's eyes shone with triumph. "We've got them." In that moment of victory, we came together again, celebratory kisses turning passionate. But as we lay together afterward, reality began to set in. "What do we do now?" Sophia asked, her head on my chest. I stroked her hair, thinking, "We take this to Martinez, but we have to be careful, if word gets out before we're ready." She nodded against me. "I know, we could both end up dead." The weight of what we were doing settled over us like a heavy blanket. We were taking on powerful people who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate any threat to their empire. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the curtains, I knew we were at a turning point. The next move we made would determine everything: our future, our freedom, maybe even our lives. I looked down at Sophia, her face peaceful in sleep, and felt a surge of determination. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. We had to. The alternative was unthinkable. Carefully, I extracted myself from her embrace and got dressed. There was work to be done, plans to be made. The endgame was approaching, and we had to be ready. As I left the apartment, I took one last look at Sophia. "I'll be back," I whispered, though she couldn't hear me. "I promise." The morning air was crisp, the city just beginning to stir. As I walked, I felt the weight of the evidence in my bag, the weight of our future on my shoulders. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back now. The precinct looked different from the outside. I'd never realized how imposing it could be until I was standing there, no longer one of them. Taking a deep breath, I pushed through the doors, the evidence burning a hole in my bag. Martinez was waiting for me in her office, blinds drawn. "Thompson," she nodded, gesturing for me to sit. "What have you got?" I laid out everything Sophia and I had uncovered. The money trail, the doctored documents, the witness statements that didn't add up. Martinez listened in silence, her face growing grimmer with each passing minute. When I finished, she leaned back, rubbing her temples. "Jesus, Thompson, this is bigger than we thought." "So, what's our next move?" I asked, trying to keep the nervousness out of my voice. Martinez's eyes hardened. "We bring them down, but we have to move fast. Once they realize we're onto them, all hell will break loose." She outlined the plan. A coordinated strike, hitting multiple locations simultaneously. It was risky, but it was our best shot at catching them off guard. As I left her office, a familiar voice stopped me cold. Well, look who's back." James stood there, arms crossed, a smirk on his face. "Heard you've been busy, Thompson, making new friends?" I forced a smile. "Just trying to clear my head, James. You know how it is." He nodded, but his eyes were cold. "Sure, just watch yourself. You never know who might be watching." As I walked away, my heart pounding, I couldn't shake the feeling that James knew more than he was letting on. Back at Sophia's apartment, I filled her in on the plan. Her face paled as I explained the risks involved. "Maya, this is insane. If anything goes wrong." I took her hands in mine. "I know, but it's our only shot at clearing your name and bringing these bastards down." She searched my eyes, then nodded. "Okay, but promise me you'll be careful." I pulled her close, breathing in her scent. "I promise." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Martinez kept me updated on the department's moves, while Sophia and I worked on tightening up our evidence. The night before the raid, neither of us could sleep. We lay tangled together, the weight of what was to come hanging heavy in the air. "Maya," Sophia whispered in the darkness, "if this works, what happens to us?" I turned to face her, tracing her features with my fingertips. "What do you want to happen?" She caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. "I want you, us, but I know it's complicated." I leaned in, capturing her lips in a tender kiss. "We'll figure it out, together." We made love that night with a desperate intensity, both of us acutely aware that it might be our last chance. Morning came too soon. I dressed in silence, strapping on the bulletproof vest Martinez had provided. Sophia watched from the bed, worry etched on her face. "I'll be back before you know it," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. She nodded, blinking back tears. "You better be." The raid was chaos. Sirens blaring, doors splintering, shouts echoing through marble hallways. I stuck close to Martinez, my heart pounding as we swept through the corporate offices. We found what we were looking for in a hidden safe. Files, hard drives, enough evidence to bury the corrupt executives for years. As Martinez called it in, I allowed myself a moment of triumph. That's when I heard it. A single gunshot, followed by a scream. Before I could react, pain exploded in my shoulder. I stumbled, the world spinning around me. Through the haze, I saw James standing there, gun raised. "Sorry, Thompson," he said, his voice oddly calm. "Can't let you ruin a good thing." Martinez's gun barked twice. James went down, a look of surprise on his face. As darkness closed in around me, I had one last coherent thought. Sophia. I had to get back to Sophia. I drifted in and out of consciousness. Flashes of sirens, worried faces, the sharp smell of antiseptic. Through it all, one voice anchored me. "Maya, please. You promised. You promised you'd come back." I fought my way back to awareness, blinking against the harsh hospital lights. Sophia was there, her face tear-stained, clutching my hand like a lifeline. "Hey," I croaked, managing a weak smile. "Told you I'd be back." She let out a choked laugh, pressing her forehead to mine. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." Over the next few days, as I drifted in and out of sleep, the full story came out. James had been on the take for years, feeding information to the corrupt executives. He'd tried to sabotage the raid, but we'd been one step ahead. The evidence we'd gathered, combined with James's attempted murder of a police officer, was enough to bring the whole operation crashing down. Arrests were made, charges were filed, and slowly but surely, justice was being served. Sophia was officially cleared of all charges. She spent every moment she could at my bedside, reading to me, filling me in on the latest developments, or simply holding my hand in comfortable silence. As I started to recover, the reality of our situation began to set in. My career was in limbo, my worldview shattered. Sophia was free, but facing the daunting task of rebuilding her life from scratch. One evening, as the setting sun painted the hospital room in warm hues, Sophia broached the subject we'd both been avoiding. "So," she said, tracing patterns on my palm. "What happens now?" I looked at her, this woman who had turned my world upside down in the best possible way. "Now," I said, pulling her close, "we start over, together." She smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I liked the sound of that. As we kissed, soft and sweet and full of promise, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them side by side. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is. The future stretched out before us, uncertain but full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what it would bring. Recovery is a bitch. That's what I kept telling myself as I struggled through physical therapy, gritting my teeth against the pain in my shoulder. But every time I felt like giving up, Sophia was there, her green eyes full of encouragement and something deeper that made my heart skip a beat. "Come on, Officer Tough Guy," she'd tease, helping me with my exercises. "Show that shoulder who's boss." I'd roll my eyes, but push harder. For her, for us. As my body healed, we focused on gathering the last pieces of evidence needed to nail the corrupt executives. It wasn't easy. Even with James out of the picture, there were still moles in the department, people willing to look the other way for the right price. Martinez kept us updated, her visits disguised as routine check-ins on an injured officer. "We're close," she'd mutter, eyes darting around the hospital room. "But they're getting desperate. Watch your backs." One night, as Sophia dozed in the chair beside my bed, I was jolted awake by a noise in the hallway. Years of police training kicked in, and I knew something was off. "Sophia," I whispered urgently, shaking her awake. "We need to go. Now." Her eyes widened in understanding. Without a word, she helped me out of bed and into a wheelchair. We'd barely made it to the service elevator when we heard shouts from my room. "Shit," Sophia hissed, jabbing the button frantically. "Maya, if they catch us." "They won't," I cut her off, even as fear churned in my gut. The doors slid open, and we rushed inside. As we descended, I could hear the commotion above us. My mind raced, trying to figure out our next move. We couldn't go to my place, or Sophia's. They'd be watching both. The elevator dinged, and we found ourselves in the deserted hospital basement. Sophia pushed me down a dim corridor, the squeak of the wheelchair wheels unnervingly loud in the silence. "Wait," I said suddenly, spotting a door marked maintenance. "In there." It was unlocked. We slipped inside, Sophia helping me out of the wheelchair and onto a stack of boxes. For a long moment we just sat there in the dark, listening to our ragged breathing. "What now?" Sophia whispered, her hand finding mine in the darkness. I squeezed her fingers, mind racing. "We need to get to Martinez. She's the only one we can trust." Getting out of the hospital undetected was a challenge, but years on the force had taught me a thing or two about stealth. We managed to snag some scrubs from a laundry cart, and with Sophia supporting most of my weight, we blended in with the early morning shift change. The cool pre-dawn air hit us as we stumbled out a side entrance. My shoulder throbbed, a reminder of how vulnerable we were, but Sophia's warmth beside me gave me strength. "There," I nodded towards an ancient payphone across the street. "Let's hope this thing still works." Martinez answered on the second ring. "Thompson, where the hell are you?" I quickly filled her in, keeping an eye out for any suspicious movement around us. "Damn it," she muttered. "All right, listen carefully. There's a safe house on the outskirts of town. I'll text you the address. Go there and stay put until I contact you." The journey to the safe house was a blur of stolen cars, back alleys, and constant vigilance. By the time we arrived at the dilapidated farmhouse, I was running on pure adrenaline. "Home sweet home," Sophia quipped as we stepped inside. The place was dusty but secure, stocked with enough supplies to last us a while. As the adrenaline wore off, exhaustion hit me like a truck. Sophia helped me to the bedroom, her touch gentle as she eased me onto the bed. "You should rest," she said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I caught her hand, suddenly overwhelmed by everything we'd been through. "Stay with me?" She smiled softly, kicking off her shoes and curling up beside me. We lay there in silence, the weight of our situation settling over us like a heavy blanket. "Maya," Sophia whispered after a while, "are you scared?" I turned to face her, taking in the worry lines etched around her eyes. "Terrified," I admitted, "but not of them. I'm scared of losing this. Losing you." She leaned in, her lips brushing mine in a tender kiss. "You won't lose me. We're in this together, remember?" As we drifted off to sleep, tangled in each other's arms, I allowed myself to hope that we'd make it through this. Hope for a future where we didn't have to run or hide. The next few days were tense. We pored over the evidence we'd managed to smuggle out, looking for anything that might give us an edge. Martinez checked in when she could, her messages cryptic but reassuring. "The net is closing," she texted one evening. "Stay put. Almost there." Sophia and I settled into a routine, our forced confinement bringing us closer than ever. We talked about everything and nothing, our childhoods, our dreams, the future we hoped to build together when this was all over. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sophia turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "You know, if someone had told me a few months ago that I'd fall for a cop, I'd have laughed in their face." I chuckled, pulling her close. "And if someone had told me I'd risk everything for a supposed criminal, I'd have arrested them for being crazy." She snuggled into my side, her warmth a comfort against the cooling evening air. "Funny how life works out, huh?" I pressed a kiss to the top of her head, marveling at how right this felt, despite everything. "Yeah, funny." The moment was shattered by the distant sound of tires on gravel. We tensed, exchanging a worried glance. This far out, any visitor was cause for concern. "Inside," I whispered, my cop instincts kicking in. "Now." We slipped back into the house, my heart pounding as I reached for the gun Martinez had left us. Sophia positioned herself by the window, peeking out through the dusty curtains. "It's a police car," she hissed. "Maya, what if—" Her words were cut off by a sharp knock at the door. We held our breath, waiting. "Thompson? Reed?" "It's Martinez. Open up." Relief flooded through me, but caution kept me on edge. "How do we know it's really you?" I called out. There was a pause, then. "The night you came to me about the case, you were wearing that hideous tie your mother got you for Christmas, the one with the dancing reindeer." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Okay, it's her." As I opened the door, Martinez stepped in, her face grim but her eyes shining with triumph. "It's over," she said simply. "We got them. All of them." The wave of emotion that hit me was overwhelming. Months of fear, doubt, and hope crashed over me all at once. I felt my knees buckle, and suddenly Sophia was there, holding me up, her tears mingling with mine. As Martinez filled us in on the details, the arrests, the mountains of evidence, the domino effect of confessions, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was over. We'd won. But as the initial euphoria faded, a new reality set in. What came next? My career was in limbo. Sophia's life had been turned upside down. We'd fought so hard to get here, but the path forward was anything but clear. As if reading my thoughts, Sophia squeezed my hand. "Hey," she said softly, "we'll figure it out. Together, remember?" I looked at her, this woman who had changed everything, and felt a surge of determination. Whatever came next, we'd face it side by side. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what the future held. The aftermath of a storm is always eerie. That's how Jersey City felt in the weeks following the arrests. The air was charged with a mix of triumph and tension, like the calm before another storm. I stood outside the precinct, my badge and gun heavy in my hands. The internal affairs investigation had cleared me of any wrongdoing, but the weight of everything that had happened still pressed down on me. "You ready for this?" Sophia asked, squeezing my hand. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. as I'll ever be. Walking back into the precinct felt like entering a foreign country. Faces I'd known for years now looked at me with a mix of awe and wariness. The whispers followed us down the hallway. There she is, the one who brought down the whole operation. I heard she went rogue. Is that the Reed woman? I thought she was a criminal. Martinez met us at her office door, her face unreadable. Thompson, Reed, come in. As we sat down, I couldn't help but feel like I was back in the principal's office, waiting to be reprimanded. Martinez leaned back in her chair, studying us. Well, she said finally, you two certainly stirred up a hornet's nest. I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up a hand. Save it, Thompson. What you did was reckless, dangerous, and completely against protocol. She paused, a small smile tugging at her lips. It was also incredibly brave and exactly what this department needed. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Martinez's expression turned serious again. But now we have a problem. The brass is worried about public perception. A cop and a former suspect, working together to bring down corruption? It's a PR nightmare waiting to happen. My heart sank. What are you saying, Captain? She sighed, rubbing her temples. I'm saying that while you've been cleared of any wrongdoing, your future here is complicated. And as for Miss Reed, well, her involvement raises some ethical questions. Sophia tensed beside me. I reached for her hand under the desk, our fingers intertwining. So what happens now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Martinez leaned forward, her voice low. Officially, you're being put on extended leave while the department figures out how to handle this. Unofficially? She glanced at the closed door before continuing. I think it might be time for you to consider other options. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My whole life had been about being a cop. Who was I without that badge? As if reading my thoughts, Sophia spoke up. What kind of options? Martinez's eyes gleamed. Well, that's where things get interesting. Your little adventure has attracted some attention. There's a private investigation firm that's very interested in your unique skill set. Both of you. My head was spinning. Private investigation? But what about? Your pension? Your benefits? Don't worry, I've made sure those are secure. Think of this as a lateral move, one that might give you more freedom to pursue the kind of justice you're clearly passionate about. As we left Martinez's office, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. My career as I knew it was over, but a new path was opening up, one that I never would have considered before. You okay? Sophia asked as we stepped out into the sunlight. I took a deep breath, letting the warm air fill my lungs. Yeah, I think I am. It's just a lot to process. She nodded, her green eyes searching mine. Maya, if this isn't what you want, we can figure something else out. I don't want you to give up your dream for. I cut her off with a kiss, right there on the precinct steps. When we parted, I couldn't help but smile at the surprised look on her face. You are my dream now, I said softly. Everything else? We'll figure it out together. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We met with the private investigation firm, pored over contracts, and started to imagine a future neither of us had ever considered before. But amidst all the change and uncertainty, one thing remained constant: us. Every night, I'd fall asleep with Sophia in my arms, marveling at how this woman who had turned my world upside down had also become my anchor. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. The press got wind of our story, and suddenly we were thrust into an unwelcome spotlight. Headlines screamed about the cop and the con, conveniently ignoring the fact that Sophia had been cleared of all charges. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of interviews and meetings, we collapsed onto the couch in my apartment. Sophia's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining automatically. You know, she said, a mischievous glint in her eye, if someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here, starting a new life with a cop-turned-private investigator, I'd have told them they were crazy. I chuckled, pulling her closer. And if someone had told me I'd fall in love with a woman I was supposed to arrest, I'd have arrested them for being insane. She looked up at me, her expression suddenly serious. Do you regret it? Any of it? I thought about everything we'd been through, the danger, the fear, the uncertainty. But I also thought about the moments of joy, the thrill of fighting for what was right, and the indescribable feeling of finding someone who understood me completely. Not for a second, I said, leaning in to kiss her softly. You? She smiled against my lips. Never. As we sat there, tangled up in each other, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about what came next. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. And that was enough. The next morning, as we prepared for our first official day as private investigators, I caught Sophia staring at me with an unreadable expression. "What?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. She shook her head, smiling softly. "Nothing, just, I love you, Maya Thompson." More than I ever thought possible. My heart swelled, and I pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I love you too, Sophia Reed, more than I can put into words." As we stepped out into the bright Jersey City morning, hand in hand, I felt a sense of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. Our story was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us next. 5 years. It's amazing how much can change in 5 years. I stood at the window of our office, watching the Jersey City skyline shimmer in the late afternoon sun. Behind me, I could hear Sophia's fingers flying over her keyboard, probably finishing up the report on our latest case. Thompson and Reed investigations had become quite the name in certain circles. Turns out, a former cop with a knack for bending rules and an ex-financial advisor with insider knowledge make a pretty damn good team. "Hey Maya," Sophia called out, breaking me from my reverie. "You might want to take a look at this." I turned, raising an eyebrow at the mischievous glint in her eye. "What's up?" She spun her laptop around, revealing an email from a name I hadn't seen in years. Captain, now Commissioner, Martinez. "Well, I'll be damned," I muttered, leaning in to read. The message was brief, but it sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. A new case, bigger than anything we'd tackled before. Corporate espionage, political corruption, and a web of lies that stretched all the way to Washington. "What do you think?" Sophia asked, her green eyes searching mine. I felt a slow grin spread across my face. "I think we're about to stir up another hornet's nest." She laughed, the sound still sending butterflies through my stomach after all these years. "Just like old times, huh?" As we packed up for the day, my mind raced with possibilities. This case could change everything. Again. But this time, we were ready for it. We stepped out onto the bustling street, the warm evening air wrapping around us. Sophia's hand found mine, a gesture so familiar now it was like breathing. "So," she said as we walked, "dinner at Mom's tonight?" I nodded, still marveling at how easily Sophia's family had accepted me. "Wouldn't miss it. You know how your mother gets if we're late." We made our way to the subway, falling into the comfortable rhythm of our life together. As we stood on the crowded platform, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. The train arrived with a rush of air, and we squeezed in among the after-work crowd. Sophia leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. "You okay?" she murmured. "You seem lost in thought." I pressed a kiss to her forehead, just thinking about how lucky I am. She looked up at me, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Yeah?" "Yeah," I nodded. 5 years ago, I thought my life was over. Now, I gestured vaguely at the space between us. Now I've got everything I never knew I wanted. Sophia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Sap," she teased, but I could hear the emotion in her voice. As we exited the subway near her mother's place, Sophia suddenly stopped short. "Oh shit, I almost forgot." I tensed, old instincts kicking in. "What's wrong?" She fumbled in her bag, pulling out a small velvet box. My heart skipped a beat. "I had this whole thing planned," she said, her cheeks flushing. "Romantic dinner, moonlit walk, but standing here with you after everything we've been through. It just feels right." She opened the box, revealing a simple but stunning ring. "Maya Thompson, will you marry me?" For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then, laughing through my tears, I pulled her into a kiss that drew a few whistles from passers-by. "Is that a yes?" Sophia asked when we finally parted, both breathless. "That's a hell yes," I grinned, slipping the ring onto my finger. We practically floated the rest of the way to our mother's apartment. As we stood outside the door, I pulled Sophia close. "You know," I said softly, "if someone had told me 6 years ago that chasing a suspect would lead me to the love of my life, I'd have laughed in their face." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining with love and mischief. "And if someone had told me that getting caught by a cop would be the best thing to ever happen to me, I'd have told them they were insane." As we stepped into the warmth of family and home, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. Our life wasn't perfect, far from it. We still had our battles to fight, our demons to face. But we faced them together, and that made all the difference. Later that night, as we lay tangled together in our bed, I thought about the case waiting for us tomorrow, about the challenges and dangers that lay ahead. But for once, I wasn't worried. "Hey," Sophia murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "What are you thinking about?" I pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "The future," I said softly. "Our future." She hummed contentedly. "Sounds nice." As I drifted off to sleep, my soon-to-be wife in my arms and a new adventure on the horizon, I couldn't help but smile. Life had a funny way of working out. All those years ago, I thought I was chasing a criminal. Turns out I was running straight towards my destiny. And I wouldn't have it any other way. The next morning, as we prepared to dive into our new case, I caught Sophia watching me with that same look of wonder she'd had 5 years ago. "Ready to change the world again, future Mrs. Thompson Reed?" I asked, holding out my hand. She took it, her grip firm and sure. "Always, future Mrs. Reed Thompson." As we stepped out into the bright Jersey City morning, I felt that familiar thrill of excitement. Our story was far from over. In fact, it felt like we were starting a whole new chapter. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us next.